Isang makakalikasang pagbati sa ating lahat. I would like to thank the organizer of this forum on reawakening our interconnectedness with nature, a way to invest in our planet. The Philippine Misereor Partnership Incorporated for inviting me to speak before you today. I was tasked to discuss with you the Rights of Nature Bill, which I co-authored, and the Environmental Agenda. Essentially, by giving a legal identity to nature, the Rights of Nature Bill urges all individuals, or the collective members of the state, to promote harmony with nature in all areas of its relationship with other human communities and the rest of nature in ecosystems. The obligation of the government and juridical persons are enumerated within the body of the measure. Accordingly, any Philippine resident is given the right to file an action to enforce the rights and obligations recognized under the Act. The Act also provides a relief or defendants of a strategic lawsuit against public participation as well as penalty provisions for violators of the Act, with the end goal being conservation and preservation of our ecosystem. A conservation committee and a trust fund to be managed by the committee are to be established. Similarly, the Climate and Environmental Emergency Declaration of the House of Representatives in the last quarter of 2020, which ensures enhanced and coherent climate actions in the executive and legislative agenda of the government, encourages that climate urgency be placed at the center of all policy decision-making from local to national level. Towards this end, the House of Representatives shall, among others, encourage local governments to issue climate change declarations within their respective jurisdictions, call on the major carbon emitters, locally and abroad, to take responsibility for climate change and to reinvest in renewable and sustainable energy. Call on local governments to adopt a no to coal or no to new coal policy within their respective jurisdictions. Call on local industries and local government units to pursue renewable and sustainable energy sources, and enjoin national government agencies to promote convergence of efforts towards strengthening data science, technology development, and research for climate change adaptation and mitigation, including the establishment of a national integrated risk information system and a national loss and damage registry to support science-based policy formulation and risk governance at national and subnational levels. For the Philippine government to place climate action as the central policy of the state that will define and give direction to all other policies would mean mainstreaming climate in all policies, plans, and projects. According to Greenpeace Philippines, climate emergency is our new reality. And to be able to address it effectively means climate lens must be the primary consideration in all our plans. Currently, much of our climate emergency actions are geared towards disaster preparedness and response. We also need policies that will prioritize climate lens, not just in disaster response and readiness, but in planning, infrastructure projects, permits for large-scale industrial activities, and fisheries and agricultural policies, among others. Last 15 July 2020, Rise Watch Action Network and Greenpeace Philippines, together with the House Committee on Climate Change, handed over to the provincial government of Bohol the Climate Emergency Response Roadmap to support small islands and coastal communities vulnerable to tidal floods and sea level rise, which is a collaborative process that was set in motion to generate concrete actions among affected communities, local governments, and experts from different fields their most important two island ecosystems. These fields include coastal engineering, marine biology, waste management, conservation, fisheries, and sustainable livelihood. The goal of the collaboration was to ensure identification of appropriate adaptation options to address the climate crisis and avoid exacerbating already existing disaster risks. Through this roadmap, stakeholders and LGUs will be guided in crafting their own declaration of a climate emergency. They will also be able to understand how such a declaration can strengthen convergence of climate change adaptation, mitigation initiatives, and climate justice. Finally, they will also be guided on how the small islands can enhance their own resilience against the negative effects of climate change, particularly sea level rise and drought. It is my fervent hope that this roadmap be replicated, most especially by other small islands and coastal communities, to prepare them to the adverse effects of climate change like Typhoon Odette. This Category 5 equivalent super typhoon, which ravaged 11 regions in the Philippines, including Bohol, has again and again reminded us of our inherent vulnerability to extreme weather events. It bears stressing that our country is one of the most vulnerable to climate change, despite being one of the least emitters of carbon. Still, our nationally determined contribution aims for a 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. However, much of this target is conditional and hence dependent on climate finance coming from the developed countries. It is high time, therefore, that we lead the call for climate justice. We must hold the major carbon emitters accountable to their promised financial assistance to the most vulnerable countries to climate change, like the Philippines. In closing, let me point out that nature encompasses our climate patterns and environment as a whole. They are interconnected, as all beings of this planet, whether sentient or not, are interconnected. We must therefore unite in preserving our environment and conserving our resources for our future and for the generations to come. Unfortunately, we have a very small window of chance left to reverse the climate crisis. So, we must act now. We must keep the alarm bells ringing for climate emergency and lead the clamor for climate justice. Thank you very much, and good day to everyone.